Hello, hello. Good morning, and I am so excited to have this conversation with you and with Tiara today because it is something that comes up so much in our language learning lives, and yet I don't feel like we're talking about it anywhere near enough. And that is, why do we feel different between us in our native language and us in any other language we study, whether it is one language or whether it is maybe three or four at once. And so she suggested this conversation, and I was so thrilled to be having it. So the topic today is language and personality. Who am I in my new language? Hi, Tiara. How are you
Hello,
doing?
I'm okay. How are you
I'm
doing?
doing really well, thank you. And I am so excited to see you and to chat with you about this. I think it is a great topic. I also love everything you have to say about language learning and your own journey. So I am so excited for this.
I'm just excited to talk with you, honestly. I could finally expose that we've been friends for almost 2 years now.
We
Can you
have!
believe it? Yeah.
And not just language learning friends, Animal Crossing friends. You know,
Exactly.
all the important things.
Exactly.
So for
The
people who
secret's out,
haven't,
guys.
yeah. So for people who haven't met Tiara before, Tiara is an American native who is currently living and working in South Korea. Um, but you've also studied Italian, Latin, Japanese, French, and ancient Greek. Yeah. Like,
Yeah.
so at the moment, your main priority is, of course, Korean. And you've been doing that through Spades, which is your business. That's right, isn't it?
It
And
sure
you call
is.
yourself a card master. So what's
Yes.
that? What's a card master?
So, for me, a card master is someone who knows a lot of different card games and someone who has experience winning a lot of card games. And so a lot of my family members taught me different games throughout my life. And then I went to schools where playing cards was just a part of our culture in between classes or even during lunch. And I was making some list of the games that I knew, and I passed over 30. So there's over 30 games that I know how to play with just a single deck of cards. I realized at that point, maybe I should, give myself some credit for that. That's like a random hobby I've picked up. And so, yeah, card master, why not?
Okay. So tell us a little bit about your story so far. How have you, like, what's your relationship with language learning been like? How have you ended up where you are right now?
That's a beautiful question. And I start at a different place every time. My favorite toy when I was a kid was actually a globe, and it was the kind that talked back to you. So it was like giving like quizzes for the capitals of different countries or quizzes for the location of different countries on a map. And so I was obsessed. Like, I'm so small and the world is so big, and I just wanted to know
Mm-hmm.
more. And then in my hometown, there was a good mix of Spanish speakers from either Mexico or Puerto Rico. And I even went to school with a good amount of them as well. And so I was always interested in being able to say the same words in more than one way.
Mm-hmm.
Apple is not just apple for everyone in the world, it's called other things.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I always really liked that, and being able to connect with other friends. It just felt like a secret language that my parents didn't even know.
Mm-hmm.
And so after some time, I was just like, I want to know more. So Spanish was good. And then my high school was actually a Catholic high school. I'm personally not Catholic, but it's the closest private school that I had in my city.
Right.
And they actually had a religion teacher, and he had Latin and ancient Greek on the walls. And so I loved the writing for lowercase letters in ancient Greek. and I didn't even know how other language systems worked at that time. I've seen them, of course, but now I'm so close to a person who knows how to read that. And so I studied Latin and Ancient Greek as independent study with my religion teacher. I think I still have the first Greek book somewhere, and it just blew my mind. And so went to college. I wanted to be a math teacher, but I studied Italian because why not? I've studied Latin for 3 years, so I also took a Latin course, and I realized I was sad going to my math class, but I was happy to not do my homework and go to my Italian class. So it was time for a language change. So I studied Italian, I studied Latin, and then my Latin teacher was like, "You should study ancient Greek." And I was like, "Oh, I did that. I didn't know you had that here." So then I studied Latin and ancient Greek, and then I did linguistics. And then if I wanted to continue with my major, I would have had to have studied either French or German. So I said, why not try a little bit of both, see which one I like. Turns out German was way too hard for me at the time. And how do I make this faster? Studied abroad in Italy, really liked my experience there. Again, got jealous because everyone there spoke English and Italian and some other language. And it made me feel like I need to get better at this. I spent 4 years studying dead languages. What's going on? So I graduated and I was like, I'm gonna go to Korea. And my parents were like, what? I'm like, yeah,
What,
I
just
want
out
to
of the
teach.
blue?
It
Completely
was
from
either,
nothing.
it was either Japan or Korea. And I had experience practicing Japanese when I was a resident assistant in college too. But it was purely for communication and also because one of my residents was from Japan and I got really close to him and I still talk to him now. And so just wanted to be able to help him get closer to the community.
Mhm.
But I was like, either Japan or Korea. And then I said, why not Korea? Why not? you know? And here I am. And
Yes.
so,
So
yeah.
tell me, how has your journey been so far learning Korean? Did you start before you left for Korea? Were you learning it from classes, textbooks, or whatever in the States first? Or is it that you landed and threw yourself in the deep end?
So as a linguist at heart, I really wanted to see how much I could learn being in the country. So, what
Mm-hmm.
I did was I learned how to read before coming to Korea.
Mm-hmm.
But when I say every time I tried to use Hello Talk, it didn't work out. Like, I used Hello Talk to connect with people, and I ended up helping them practice English. And I learned about Korean culture a lot, but I didn't learn the most Korean. Like at
Yeah.
best, I learned how to read sagwa and oi, which means like
Mhm.
apple and cucumber.
Yeah.
And that was about it, right? So I came to Korea and was very stressed to read the McDonald's or Burger King menu. And even though it was written just like in English, but just with Korean pronunciation,
Mm-hmm.
it was stressful. So we had classes in our school, like as a English teacher. They had a program for English teachers who wanted to study
Mm-hmm.
Korean. So I took that class. It was helpful a little bit, but I think it was great for just meeting friends.
Yeah.
I met I made the most progress with my students
Mm-hmm.
and with my coworkers because everyone always spoke Korean. And I'm not afraid to be like, I need help. I carried a notebook, I carried my phone,
Yeah.
and I always asked questions. I tried to make sentences. Yeah, they laughed at me a lot, a lot. I got laughed at every day. And of course, it became a part of my personality to just laugh too. Because, I went from being graded for languages to now I'm grading them. So, of course, they could laugh at me. And my first year was really tough. But after that, I learned it's okay to make mistakes. Like, I always knew it in my heart, but to go through that in school was just, life is not
Yeah.
that serious when it comes to languages. Just have
Yeah.
fun with it.
And I get that. There's a real process
Mm-hmm.
between just hearing it's okay to make mistakes. It's fine not to, it's fine to be a beginner. All of those messages. But
Mm-hmm.
there's such a difference between hearing it and intellectually knowing it, and then
Exactly.
not beating yourself up when you can't get it right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Such
it
a
is so
process.
true. Like it in your brain and in your heart, you hear it, you see it, and you're like, okay, make mistakes. It's perfectly
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
Hello, someone saying hi to you. I love
But it's so,
it.
it's like there's this sort of switch in your brain that
Mhm.
says yes, it's okay to make mistakes, but not that mistake, and not
Right.
you, and not
Hmm.
there, and
Hmm.
wouldn't it have been better if you got it right the first time? Like,
Exactly.
yeah.
Hmm. So in person, they never saw that I was stressed out. But when I came home, I'm like, oh my God, I made this mistake. I made this mistake. I made this mistake. After a long time, I was like, why?
Mm-hmm.
Why am I doing this to myself? In the end, the conversation went well, or
Mm-hmm.
I failed and I learned how to not fail again, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
I get that. So you said the sort of laughing at yourself and laughing around language became kind of a almost intrinsic trait in you in Korean. What else did you notice about the difference between you in English and you in Korean?
I feel like I'm extremely careful when I speak in English,
Mm-hmm.
but when I speak in Korean, I tend to stick to my simple sentence structure and I
Mm-hmm.
stick to the vocabulary words that I know will be effective.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I'm not afraid to just try new things. Like the way
Mm-hmm.
that I speak in Korean is so different from the way that I speak in English. At the same time, I feel like the way I speak English has changed
Oh,
after speaking Korean for so long. And so there's that too.
okay. So when you talk about being more careful in English, do
Mm-hmm.
you think it's just a case of, you've probably got like 100 times more vocabulary, you've got so many more constructions that you can play with and you can
Mm-hmm.
manipulate for, speaking to persuade versus speaking to entertain and all that kind of stuff? Do you think it's just about the sheer amount of choice that you have in English that maybe you don't have in Korean? Or do you feel like really it is about your sort of new personality coming out, as Tiara in Korean is just a lot less worried or a lot more playful?
Yeah, I feel like I'm a lot more playful. And I do also feel like I didn't slash I still don't have that much I don't have that much fluency in Korean yet to be able to 100% of the time like lead a conversation
Mm-hmm.
as much as react to it.
Yeah.
But because I don't have that pressure, it makes it easier for me to just have fun.
Mm-hmm.
Like in English, sometimes I feel that pressure to keep the conversation going. But now that I'm in a new country and now that I have to, try to figure out what's going on, that's already the challenge
Yeah.
for me. So
Yeah.
if I'm able to answer, I just feel, yes, I answered it. you know?
Tiara won. Yeah.
Exactly. So even I could feel the mistakes and I don't care. I
Mm-hmm.
really don't. Like, of course, I want to study more, but at the same time, in most cases, the mistakes either make a good joke or the mistakes are just like, it's not that bad.
Yeah.
Because even in English, I make a lot of mistakes, right? So maybe I am fluent if I could make those mistakes in Korean, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely. And
Hmm.
have you found, because you are immersed in this new culture at the same time as your language, you haven't had that like staggered stage? Do you find that there are all kinds of aspects of vocabulary in Korean that you don't even have in English? Maybe things specifically to do with Korean culture
Hmm.
where you don't necessarily have that translation first?
You know what? That's an excellent question because, especially in Korean, compared to any of the other languages I've learned, there are so many phrases that I cannot translate into English.
Yeah.
And it feels very difficult for me to try and express myself in English because of some of the phrases that are just more effective in Korean.
Yeah.
And I also feel like just trying to figure out the best way to answer this question because it's like it's so true. Can you like I haven't quite thought of it that way. Like what can you repeat the question again, but even more like
Yeah.
direct?
So what I'm asking is, have there been
Mm-hmm,
like lexical fields or
mm-hmm,
domains that have come up in Korean where you didn't have an English baseline first?
yeah.
Like I had this in my degree, and I know I've brought this up
Mm-hmm,
before in my podcast, and it was a lot of literary translation,
mm-hmm,
which meant that although I didn't really have a me in French because it was all written and a lot of it was like 17th, 18th, and 19th century, I did
mm-hmm,
so many word lists of flowers,
mm-hmm.
bird species, types of undergrowth, types of velvet, stuff that was in like, period literature.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know the English, so the
Yeah,
French came first.
exactly.
So I was learning like all these bird species. I didn't know what the bird was. You could show me a gallery of birds. I wouldn't have been able to point them out, but I did know the bird in
Yeah,
French. I could give you the English translation, but the
right.
English came because the French came. Um, so I guess that's what I'm asking. Have there been
Mm-hmm,
things where you know the Korean first, maybe in a
mm-hmm.
whole like aspect of now your day-to-day life, where you're like, I don't have the English for this. My English will not support this little facet of me in Korean.
There there are some of those words. Even like a couple of my favorite words that I use every day is
Mhm.
just a simple like the word kunyang is one of my favorite words because we can never answer with the word just in English. Like why did you do that? Just
Mhm.
I couldn't do that, but I could do that with the word kanyang. So sometimes when I'm talking to my parents, even, and they're like, "Oh, why did da 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 da?" And I'm like, "Kanyang," and then I have to immediately try and like answer in English with like a different like
Yeah, like I
reason for
felt
why I
like
did
it,
that.
or
Yeah,
yeah, just
I
did.
feel there's moments of the mixing with simple words like that. There's even maybe last week I was giving a speech to my university students actually, and I used the word taptap, and this word is kind of like it means like uncomfortable or
Okay.
pressure, or I can't quite translate the feeling 100% into English, but it's like uncomfortable and pressure had a baby. That's how I internalize
Yeah,
it. But everyone knows this feeling because it's like I want to say things, but I can't. I'm frustrated or I'm sad or I'm angry, you know. I have those moments quite a bit with some words that are just more, what's the word, more convenient to
yeah,
use in Korean first. And so I think about it in Korean first, and then I have to try and use a paragraph to explain what
yeah.
I'm trying to convey,
So with
if that makes
the
sense.
word duck duck, is it the whole idea of like that feeling you feel before you put yourself out there in some way where you're just like, I don't want to do it, I've got to do it, I can think of 100 reasons why it could go wrong, like, is that it?
It's more of a like you're in a job you really don't want, or you're in a situation that you can't get out
Oh,
of, or
I
there's
see.
something that you really want to say, but you know it would be inappropriate or possibly not accepted the right way.
Yeah,
So you might as well just hold it,
yeah,
that feeling,
yeah.
you know?
Yeah, I do
So
know. And it's true, I have no idea what word we would use, or even like a good set phrase
just
that
a
would,
one
yeah,
phrase. I don't have that.
yeah, yeah. Like, yeah, I can see why. It's just that feeling of I feel like I'm bursting to say something, but I know I need to
Right.
keep it to myself.
I got the closest I got was suffocating, but I feel like if I say that to other
Too
people in a way,
broad.
it could feel
Yeah,
like what are you saying? But that is a very interesting question because it does happen sometimes, especially if I'm here and there's other like Korean English users
Mm-hmm.
and we have those conversations and both of us understand. So I could use it no problem. But to my sister, for
Yeah,
example, probably not.
yeah. I mean, I suppose you can bring them in, right? If you only
Hmm.
bring in a few at a time, people will learn them just like a new buzzword or a new,
Hmm.
um, yeah, make them happen.
Right.
So, yeah.
Hmm.
So when you sort of, we floated the idea of this conversation originally, you talked about this idea of almost building an avatar or building a character
Hmm.
in whatever language you're studying. And I really want to ask you about that now, which is how deliberate do you feel like you've been in creating Tiara in Korean? Or do you feel like it's more like the erosion of a rock where it's more cultural influence and your day-to-day life that's kind of molding it?
What I will say is experiencing different cultures in different countries, even, I have a different way of communicating with new people,
Yeah,
you know? Like communicating with people in my hometown is different from communicating with people in a different state and then in a different
yeah,
country, right? So when I approach new people, I'm careful at first, but I learn how to adapt to the way that they talk, right? And so coming into Korea, I didn't know, I knew what to expect because, of course, I did my research or I had moments where I was really curious for how other foreigners in Korea reacted to the environment, right? But when I came here, I said, okay, first, I'm not going to be in Seoul, right? I'm in Daegu. So this is an area that even has its own slang or like dialect, right?
yeah,
So I want to learn that. And then I want to be able to have fun with it, right? Whereas when I was in Italy, when I studied abroad there, I was there as a student and I was just shy. And I felt like my Italian really didn't get as high as I wanted it to because I was so shy. So
mm,
I had that experience in Italy first. And then coming into Korea, I was like, whatever I did there, I don't want to do that this time.
yeah,
So I don't know if that helps with the mindset that I was in before, but also being a teacher, it's like even if I'm having a bad day, my students don't deserve to see me having a bad day.
yeah,
So I slowly learned how to keep a poker face or like my first year, like I said, was very rough for a lot of reasons, but I had to learn how to like put that aside for a few
yeah,
hours, teach, and then go home and process my feelings or,
yeah,
process what I learned or what I failed at, all of these things. So I was very deliberate in the way that I talked to other people, both in
mhm,
my work environment, but also in my community. I used to go to this, like, during my walk home from
yeah,
school, there's a thrift shop. There we go. And the thrift shop had these nice, sweet, elderly ladies, and they always used to stop me and ask simple questions. And
mhm,
so, what I would do is I would just go in, and sometimes I brought fruit or some snacks, and I would just sit there and listen to them talk. And sometimes they would teach me this wisdom, like how to walk backwards to, build my legs, or they would let me try on clothes. And there's a convenience store. I didn't really need anything from the convenience store, but I would go in there and just buy the smallest candy and talk to the cashier. Or I would find these small places near where I lived so that they know me. And would I do that in the US? Maybe no. Absolutely not. I would be in my car or I would be in someone's car and I would just
mhm.
go to and from work and school because I do not people. But here, I want to people because I have to learn this language, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So actually that brings us to another sort of point with in a new country, it's not just your language that grows. You know, your fashion sense is naturally going to change a bit because that's what clothing is available and around you. It's going
Yeah.
to be what you eat. It's going to be the stuff that you naturally listen to, just if you are listening to podcasts and watching movies and series and things like that. I'm guessing your friends in Korea are a mix of Korean people and foreigners from everywhere.
Right.
Yeah. So there's a lot of agents acting on your new personality other than just you in your new language, right?
Yes. It's everything. And I feel like when everyone thinks about immersion and like being in the country and culture, that it just magically changes their language and they could speak well. I also feel like the reason why some people are able to speak well, and I'm not gonna lie, it took me forever to feel like I could say I could speak Korean. Maybe after 1 or 2 years here, I was still shy to say I speak Korean. I could go in a taxi, I could go to a hospital, but that's about it, right? But now I could say I speak Korean because of the culture, because of the fashion, because of the food, or because of, I feel like your Korean especially levels up with the more food you know in Korean because there's so much food and I'm still learning foods in Korean. I'm still learning colors in Korean, and that's sad to say, but Koreans must know that if you have more than 4 words for the colors black, white, red, blue, or green, I have a right to say the colors are hard, you know? But honestly, like the culture is what really helps you understand how to speak. Like if I didn't come here and I just tried to learn Korean in the US, me personally, just the way that I learn, I ask a lot of why questions. And Korean, compared to English, is not a language where those why questions will get you far. And it changed the way I learn languages because I've learned most of these languages in a classroom or by books, but I wanted to speak them, right? And when you're learning it in a classroom, you're stuck to the grades or just getting feedback and accepting the feedback without understanding the culture in a deeper level.
Yeah.
Because you're taking the language class, you're not taking the culture class per se. You learn a little bit of culture from the textbook, but you don't really get to hear how other people use it and the way that they think. Here, I could say that the way that they think here is different, and I've learned to appreciate that, and it helps me guess with this new word, how do I use it in a sentence, right? Whereas if I'm just thinking as a US English speaker, I would probably put this word here, but it really belongs here. You know what I mean? So it's more of like that's what I got from being in this environment. On top of the fashion, which definitely changed, my diet changed completely, and friends all over the world, which is like teaching me every day that everyone's so different and so similar. Right? Yeah.
Yeah. So for you, if people who are watching this are thinking, in my new language, just still feel, well, I feel like my new language isn't supporting who I am as a person, you know? In my native language, I am this whole three-dimensional person. I've got so many interests. I'm known as the funny one, the super cheerful, optimistic one, the philosophical one, whatever it is. I've got this whole personality. I've got this whole range of interests and expertise and all these experiences. And then in my new language, my whole lexicon is still chapter 1, myself, chapter 2, my family, chapter 3, my city. Like, how would you recommend, based on your experience, that people can bridge that gap a little bit and feel more like a person in their newer language?
It sounds like the silliest thing, but that's where the question of like building this character comes in, right? Because I separately, I strongly believe that we're not just this one being.
Mm-hmm.
A very small group of people could just be content with just being this one being. But learning a new language is that chance to literally change your mind. That's what we're doing. We're expanding our minds when we learn a new language
Mm-hmm.
and culture. So it might as well be the time to accept that we're not always bright, we're not always social, and it could be a time to build those other skills. I also agree that I'm a lot more social, a lot more funny when I speak English, but I've found a way to be funny in Korean. And in the beginning, they were laughing because I made mistakes. And now I know I make mistakes and I can laugh at that. And that's
Mm-hmm.
where it comes full circle for how important it is to really appreciate the journey, which is what I love about your channel so much, because you truly embrace like it's not going to look the same every day. And it
No.
doesn't. It's not going to be roses every day. I feel like my language went like this and then this.
Mm,
And then at some point here and then back to the same square. And then it went up a bit, but then it stayed like this. And then it went
yeah.
down and up. It's not going to look the same.
No.
So you might as well just enjoy it. When you're frustrated, it's okay to take a break and say, this is not working for me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I call it like the language breakup, where you just play your breakup songs and you're just like, I'm not even
Oh,
thinking about Korean for like 2 weeks, right? Like, I have this book that I just bought very recently for learning vocabulary,
okay.
and it has a bunch of words in it. Let me see. Yeah, it has like 900 words or something in it. Of course,
Wow.
it's backwards. Why would I do that? And yeah, I wanted to learn it the same way that my students in elementary and middle school learn vocabulary words. So this is a kind of book that has all these words in English and then it has explanations and stuff in Korean. Have I opened this book? No. Why? Because when I think about words, it makes me scared. But if I could use them in a sentence, then I feel more comfortable. But just seeing a list of
Word
words
lists. Yeah.
terrifies me. So that's why I have to find a different way to learn vocabulary or
Yeah.
even make a way to learn vocabulary. It just
Yeah.
doesn't work for me.
Yeah. And
But
go
yeah,
ahead. Sorry.
no, not a problem.
I wanted to say it's one of the things you've sort of highlighted here is this idea of like figuring out your commitments as what makes you you in your native language. So you
Mm-hmm.
said in English, you are the funny one. And then in Korean, in the beginning, obviously you didn't have the language to tell jokes, tell anecdotes, do the whole storytelling thing. So you
Mm-hmm.
were like, I need to find a way to be funny in Korean. And then I feel more like Tiara, but in Korean. And
Right.
for you, that was, it started with people laugh when you make mistakes because it's funny, because it's cute, all the things, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's sort of grown and you can find newer ways to be funny and you can update and you can add to your repertoire as your language and your cultural knowledge
Mm-hmm.
grows, and your friendship group as well. I mean, the humor is so much also based in the exact people that you have around you, isn't it, too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's more. It's like I discovered some of the skills that I either didn't have before or I had before, but just left alone for
Mm-hmm.
a while. So, like
Yeah.
writing. Now I like writing. I realized I love the Olympics 3 years ago. I was so excited for the Olympics to be in Tokyo, even though it was COVID season, I know. But I'm in Korea and Japan was like right there, right? I was so excited because I took an Olympics class in college, true story, called Ancient Greek, like the Ancient
Yeah.
Olympics, like it was a course. And so one of my favorite classes, actually. And I learned about all of the ancient sports and even every year in between leading up to the early 2000s. And the final exam was actually memorizing certain events from the very first Olympics to the most recent one. And so I was very interested in the Tokyo Olympics. And I was trying to tell my co teachers that I'm interested in the Olympics. Like, that was the exact sentence I was trying to say.
Right.
And started searching how to say it. And then I saw different websites talking about the Olympics. I'm such a nerd. I printed those like newsletters, talked to my co teachers, highlighted the words that I didn't know, and I said, okay, I'm going to summarize all of the Olympics, starting from the first one to the most recent one. I had a journal and I would write a paragraph about each of the Olympics and get feedback from my co
Wow.
teachers. And I stopped after doing 20 of those, but that's a random skill that I probably wouldn't have done by myself in English,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, I mean, that would be impressive if I did, but I did not.
I'd
I
be
came up with
impressed.
that
Yeah.
yeah, I came up with that idea purely because I wanted to communicate with my environment.
Mm-hmm.
And I found a hobby and an interest that I had forgotten about
Yeah.
for years,
Yeah.
right? Like, it starts with little things like opening your mind and accepting, like, I'm a baby.
Yeah.
I'm a baby. What kind of personality do I want to be? Let me like click some of these new traits for this new language. Like, I am not, what is it? I'm not the best at this skill, but maybe I could do it again in this language. And if I don't like it, I tried. I
Yeah.
did that for like 2 months. I
Mm-hmm.
stopped because no one's forcing me to, right?
Mm-hmm.
And with English, we've already made that personality. We've lived with it for years. Like with my mother tongue, I'm stuck with it. And it changes slowly as I grow, but for the most part, I'm comfortable with
Yeah.
who I am. But in the new language, I could do anything,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And I also think too that the country we were born in, we
Mm-hmm.
often know because we were socialized into it as children, these are the traits that are highly rewarded in my birth country.
Right.
So in the States, it might be an
Mm-hmm.
entrepreneurial spirit, it might be being confident and extroverted, or,
Yeah.
a whole host of things.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you go to a country that's vastly different, where actually you're like the most
Mm-hmm.
rewarded or socially acceptable or whatever traits are different here. So I kind of need to change all the pins
Mm-hmm.
in my map of me to be like, okay, maybe like being independent and outspoken
Mm-hmm.
is less desired here. What people really want is this and this and this,
Mm-hmm.
or and so I'm guessing as well that that is also like building the sort of walls around your new personality, or kind of giving you some guidelines.
Yeah, that's true. Like here, especially, I realize I have to find even more of a balance between not speaking too much or like when I do speak, not being as direct as I would
Mm-hmm.
be in the US. Like, especially for me, I'm from New Jersey, closer to New York City. I know some people don't like New Jersey people if they're from New York City, but I never cared. I live too close to New York City to care, but we speak really direct, even more than in the South. And a lot of people might know that. So I'm used to switching between the two because my mom's family is from the South. My dad's more so a city boy, so we stayed up north. Um, and now they live in Virginia. Don't find them. But anyway, just overall, like here, it's a different world. There's
Mm-hmm.
different levels of speaking depending on who you're talking to.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of used to it, but like, now I'm used to it, of course. But in the beginning, it was tough. I was like, I'm just going to speak politely to everybody. Yes, ma'am. Hello, sir. That was me. Like little kids, hello, ma'am. How can I help you?
Yeah.
like, you know,
And that
because I don't want to, I don't, oh, I'm sorry. but like I didn't want to be rude to anyone,
Sure.
right? And that affects the way that I think and speak. So I'm more quiet
Yeah.
even because I want to watch how other people talk.
Yeah, and that's the difficulty as well with cultures where there are levels that are
Mm-hmm.
asymmetrical. So, in countries like in French, where if you use the vous form, you use it, both parties will use it to each other.
Mm-hmm.
In Korean, you can't just mirror what the other person is doing, because if you use
Right.
the higher form to them, they're using a lower form to you. So it's not
Yeah.
like you've got that person to just, I'll do what they do, it'll be okay.
Yeah.
um, the judgment call really does lie with you, doesn't it?
That has happened a couple of times, and I'm not gonna lie, I was scared at one point that maybe I wouldn't go to work tomorrow. I talked to
Mm-hmm.
the principal using just like the middle polite form, but apparently I'm supposed to use the highest form, and I was nervous, and they were like, "Oh, you're not Korean, so you should be fine." And I was like, "Still, I will never make this mistake again." you know?
It's
But
just
it's
one
hard.
of those things.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so difficult.
Mhm.
People do know that this is something that foreigners are going to need. It's a process you have to go through to learn it.
Mhm.
And, even just how often in your normal life would you be speaking at that level and conjugating those verbs and using the nouns that go with those verbs? Because it's not
Mhm.
just the verb forms that change, is it? Lots of things change.
Yeah.
So it's not like just, oh, I'll switch between, the tu and the vous form and then I'll be all right. You've got
Mhm.
this one form that you use like once in a blue moon. Yeah.
Right. You know, I feel like with every language I've learned, I've definitely had like a difference in personality. Like, I'm funny. I don't laugh all the time. But if I'm speaking Spanish, somehow with people who speak Spanish, there is some kind of light or energy that's like, I am laughing every 5 seconds.
Yeah.
I am reacting to something. Either I'm extremely emotional in a fun way or a sad way or an angry way. The reactions are more
Yeah.
passionate, and I don't mean it in a bad way. It's really fun for me because it's like I'm not usually that outgoing.
Yeah.
But then in Korean or in what, like even with Japanese or with Korean, I tend to be more of the listener. Like
Mm-hmm.
even if something's really funny, I'll laugh, but it's not like I react and add more to the jokes like I
Yeah.
would be able to in Spanish. And it's just so interesting where I realize like who am I sometimes when I'm talking to different people from different cultures, you know?
Yeah.
And there was definitely that time where, like, I realized if I drink a little bit of wine, there is a good chance I'll be able to speak way faster in a different language. I didn't know that was possible either. But the situations always change how comfortable we are around other people. So you never know.
Mm-hmm. And you said at the beginning that you're actually noticing that you in English is changing quite dramatically as
Mm-hmm.
well, with you as Korean growing. Also, it's affecting what you in English looks like. What have you noticed?
For one, I definitely speak slower and I tend to speak a little bit more clearly.
Mm.
Also, because of teaching in
Teaching, yeah.
schools. And I feel like that just always will change things. But I also feel like my word order has changed quite a bit now. Like,
Ah, okay.
a, a lot of the time when I'm trying to think of certain adjectives or if I'm trying to think of an adverb, I put it in a different order sometimes if I'm too excited or if I'm not like, thinking 100% in the moment, like making a perfect sentence.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so sometimes I'm noticing like even in moments like this, it's like sometimes I'm noticing versus sometimes I notice. It's like just the way that I would speak normally is
Yeah.
just a lot more, I'm using ing more, or I
Mm.
tend to use phrases that I have never heard, or maybe I'm just creating them. I'm not sure, you know, like,
Like a kind of interlanguage
Right.
innovation. Yeah.
Like, who am I even in English? And if I'm talking with people who are English learners, I tend to speak in a way where my English is more free. Like, I'm not focused on speaking English 100% correctly either, because
Yeah.
especially, for example, Koreans who speak English tend to follow a certain sentence pattern. And if I'm talking with them for a long time, I just follow that pattern
Of
because I
course.
know
Yeah.
exactly what they're trying to say.
Yeah.
And I can just repeat it, and then the conversation keeps
Yeah.
going. And it just furthers my point that,
Yeah.
like, especially if your language goal is communication, perfection is not the goal. Like,
Mm-hmm.
at best you could practice your pronunciation, but like, again, communication is just, can you have the conversation? Can
Mm-hmm.
you stick through it even if you don't know all of the words? Are you confident enough to just say, what did you say, or say it again? That's the most effective thing that you could say in the moment in front of a person. They're not grading you, they're just trying to understand you so they can respond. And then what happens after that conversation? You clap your hands, and even if you didn't like what happened, it's done.
Mm-hmm.
You did it.
Yeah.
You know?
And I do love what you said about almost like downloading textbook speak as well, because we've had exactly the same experience, my partner and I, in
Mm-hmm.
China, where one of the phrases that really stood out to me, because all the students learned it from a really young age and then applied it to everything, was, it's more convenient for our daily lives.
Mm-hmm.
And they said that about everything. Foods, clothing, any
Yeah.
thoughts they had on anything, it was more convenient for their daily
Yeah.
lives. And it's one of those things where if you hear it enough times in enough circumstances, eventually it's going to come out of your mouth and you're going to think, what
Exactly.
have I just said and why? Um,
Yeah. It's really like that
yeah,
too. It's true.
yeah,
I'm trying to think of some phrases that I've heard so much and I say it
yeah,
now and it frustrates me, but I just laugh. I'm just like, you know what? I've been here long enough. You
yeah,
know, it's my souvenir.
yeah. And now, like, so we left China in 2018,
Mm-hmm.
and since I've come back, I have not uttered that sentence once before this conversation. I don't think, like, it doesn't come back with
Yeah.
you and just stay there for the rest of your life.
Side note, leaving your country for a few years, and then coming back and they speak a different language other than English. Like, there was new slang when I went back to the US last year.
Yeah.
I was like, I forgot to study English. Well, this is gonna be fun. you know, like, language is changing all the time. So it's okay if it doesn't like sound exactly like me because, you know,
Yeah,
yeah.
definitely. So, is there anything else that you would like me to ask you before we wrap up about this conversation? A topic that I haven't brought up, or a question that you kind of think you'd like to cover? Um,
I feel like we did a really good conversation, and I guess I just have a final thing, like a piece of advice that I would love to say for anyone
Absolutely.
who's listening.
Love advice.
Yeah.
Yes.
So hopefully you could feel the good energy between me and Emily as friends anyway, but I really want you to do what it takes to feel comfortable. It's the message that I always love from Emily's page. It always brings me joy to see that there are language learners who are honest about that journey and saying, you know what, this is frustrating, right? But at the same time, it's not going to define my language journey. There are
Mhm.
days where you don't want to study at all, and that's fine. Just be honest with yourself. If your goal is communication, either through messaging or through talking to others, through call or in person, just be okay with making mistakes.
Mhm.
Be okay with not feeling like yourself. Be okay with finishing a conversation and being like, what was that? Right? The goal here is just for you to get comfortable and to communicate. And communicating is a different level of fluency, right?
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't mean that you're going to have the perfect grammar right away. Practice makes perfect. I've been here for 5 years, in Korea for 5 years, in Daegu for 5 years, and I could safely say I am not fluent in the language. I go to a language exchange every Sunday, and I'm still learning new things every week. Do I always
Mm-hmm.
use those new things? No. But at the same time, I'm just glad that I have a space to practice and be safe. And it's okay because people know that you're trying.
Mm-hmm.
And if people don't accept that you're trying, they're not the people you want to talk to anyway. So keep going. Don't give up. Be kind to yourself, but remember to have fun and
Mm-hmm.
explore. That's all.
I love it. And if people want to see more of your work
Mhm.
or hear more about your life in Korea, where can they find you?
That is perfect. I tend to forget about that. Well, you're in the right spot, guys. My Instagram is Speaking Spades. I hope to be more active on YouTube soon. I have a website, www.speakingspades.com. And if you like anything that you see on the website, the language quiz to find your personality, you could figure out. It's a really fun quiz. I know we talk about it a lot, but I swear I get messages sometimes and they're like, I took the test and I'm a spade. And I'm like, wow, that is really cool that
What
you're
does it mean
excited
to be a
about that.
spade?
So the spade is a person, is a type of learner who is just, they find the quickest way to
Oh yeah.
learn and then they dip. So they find the system where maybe they find a list of the 500 most useful words and they memorize that list, and then they don't focus on grammar right away, or they focus on the important grammar first and they just use that because they're not trying to be in a classroom. They just
That's
want to get
me, I
in and get
think.
out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a
And
club. I'm not a spade.
what? So I'm guessing it's based on the four suits.
Exactly.
What's a
So it's
club?
like a Hogwarts house.
Mm-hmm.
And so you could even be a mix of things. And so for me, I'm a club. And so I focus on conversations. So I focus on the skills that are needed in order to communicate emergencies or to communicate my thoughts. And those are the things that inspire me to study. So I might do more creative writing, or I might create scripts. And the quiz also gives a lot of different activity ideas that you might not have discovered in your
Yeah.
like study plan. So it's worth a shot. And I really like it because, people like being in a group, right?
Yeah. People like to say, this is my type. This is
Yeah,
my avatar. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. And
definitely.
so it's gonna go through a huge makeover soon, but if you like and support any of the things you see, I make language playing cards I'm a huge fan of so that you too could be a card master. I have, yeah, so I'm gonna be teaching these things soon. I want to figure out the best way to teach different card games to people because I realize they don't know. So if they know, then they'll be addicted like me.
Yeah. You're going to be at Language Fun Fest as well, aren't you? It's
Yes.
early December. Yeah.
Yes, December is going to be one of the busiest months for
Yeah.
me because we do the 31-day language challenge as well. For it's a speaking challenge that's going to be every day in the month of December. Me and my
Including
wonderful friend,
Christmas.
including Christmas.
What?
You're gonna have to talk on Christmas Day and New Year's
No.
Eve.
Nobody told
Exactly.
me that.
It's coming very soon. The Language Fun Fest, very excited to be one of the presenters. I'm going to teach solitaire. So, it's a perfect chance to do some language challenges and learn how to play a game. And
Mm-hmm.
so there's so many things happening, and I believe that's not all, but just keep following my Instagram because that's where most of it goes down and up.
And I will put both your well, I'll tag you on the Instagram anyway, but I'll also put your website in the show notes when this goes up for the replay as well.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I've loved having a chat with you this morning.
I love talking with you every time we talk. And thank you so much for inviting me. It is always a pleasure to see you on my page, whether it's your notes or just to be able to see you talk with other people. I feel like I'm very shy, believe it or not, when it comes to like Instagram lives. I rarely do them, but for you, I'll do it any day. So thank you for having me on your page. I love the things that you do, and I love the way that you are supporting all the language learners in the world with your energy and your content. So a huge thank you for all that you do and for having me here today.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Yeah. Have a wonderful day.
Have a wonderful evening. Bye-bye.
Bye.